What is up, Watch fam? I am Christian from Theo and Harris. Happy Monday and welcome to Rant&h. Today we're going to be talking about investing in watches, the nuances of investing in watches, why I think that you should, for sure, and shouldn't invest in watches. But before we get into the entire, spiel, quick wristwatch check. I am wearing a Gruen Precision. It's a 31mm watch. It reminds me a lot of a Patek Philippe Reference 96, a watch that I have loved, admired, and wanted to own for a long time, but unfortunately that watch is just out of my price range. So wearing something like this, with these beautiful, just flat gold alpha hands, it just reminds me of that classic, kind of restrained and still experimental kind of style. I don't know. I love it. So yes, this watch is available in the watch shop at theoandharris.com, and there are 6 new watches hitting tomorrow, including a white gold Rolex 1803 date. We have a couple other things, a Longines, we have a Tudor, a magnificent Tudor. We have a lot of stuff hitting. We're really picking up the ante with the inventory. We're really going heavy. And I'm really happy to announce that tomorrow on theoandharris.com, along with the new watches, we're releasing a new series, but it's exclusive to theoandharris.com in our vlog section. It's going to be like a lookbook of the watches just in the wild, not a video, no narrative, just photos, just really in-depth, kind of in-the-metal photos of what these watches look like in real life, not just, with professional photography, what they look like at a coffee shop and on my wrist and being flipped. And I don't know, I think I'm really excited about it. So it's cool. So let's get into today's episode. Okay, let me start with this, and I don't think that any of you will be surprised by this statement. I think watches are awesome. I think that they represent the most interesting way for anyone, particularly men. It's just what the mass consumers are. It's the best way to spend, luxury money. Yes, clothes are cool, and yes, I get it, and I like to look nice as well. But to me, watches have more value. Watches will survive to your grandson, not an Oxford shirt. My grandson's not going to want to wear my Oxford shirts and my loafers. His shoes might not be as, the same size. So to me, watches have such an emotional connection, probably because of the longevity that they represent. I love that about watches. And I think that 95% of the time, when someone buys a wristwatch, it should be considered something that you're going to buy, wear, own, and enjoy. Not something that you're going to flip and turn a profit on in a year. I think that that's the wrong mentality. But I want to dive into that more and talk about how it actually is possible, quite possible, and not so uncommon for people to actually, whether they meant it or not, look at watches as investments. Look at watches as things they can actually make money on. So let's talk about the two major ways in which you can actually turn a profit on a watch. Number one is the scour. It's got a lot to do with patience and a lot to do with luck. The scour is basically finding watches for less than they are worth. It's finding a white gold Rolex GMT Master for 15 grand, because you can flip it for 20 and still sell it at a price that at 20 that is under market. So that's the number one. That's the easiest, theoretical way to do it. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen so much. It doesn't happen because the internet exists, and no one's going to sell a $23,000 watch for 15 so you can sell it for 20. It doesn't happen, typically. But it does. I have heard of it happening. I've heard of people, being tight for cash and just liquidating things. In those instances, yes. I've heard of barnyard finds. I've heard of Goodwill shops. I've heard of garage sales. I've heard of people picking up JLC memo boxes for $30. It happens. Not often. You can't rely on it. And if you went out of your way to do it, you become kind of a trash picker, which is no shame in that. But I think net game, although it might sound good on the surface, you're not going to be satisfied with the money you're making full time. I don't necessarily know, and intuitively I don't think that it's there. But it is a lot of fun, and it is very exciting to do that. So that's number one, the scour. Number two is the actual investment. Number two is reading a market, with Number two is the actual investment. Number two is reading a market. It's following your gut, understanding the trends and what is rising in value, and then investing at the right price. That one is the one that I'm emailed about more often. People are constantly asking me, Christian, what's the watch I should invest in right now if I'm looking to make money in the next 6 months? And yes, we can Monday morning quarterback. I will right now. I'll tell you that if you purchased a Rolex GMT 1675 5 years ago, you made money. You probably bought it for 4 and it's worth 8 now. That happens. It just does. If you bought a Universal Geneve pole router, a great example, a year ago, you could have picked it up for $500-$600. Now they're worth $1,800. I mean, of course, that's a variable number. It could be 15, it could be 2,000. I mean, they do change depending on little details, but that's a huge difference. Universal Geneve chronographs, watches that nobody really wanted 4 years ago, 5 years ago, that are worth astronomical numbers now. Now, these things happen for a lot of reasons. A lot of it has to do with blogging. A lot of it has to do with Instagram and the newfound opportunity to make things that were unpopular popular, and that has shifted markets. There's no question. Heuer Octavias are another example of watches that not so long ago nobody wanted to touch with a 10-foot pole, and now they're extremely valuable pieces. So let me say this. I know those because they've happened. I don't know what the next one is. I really don't. And if I did, I would be buying them in droves, and I probably wouldn't tell you anyway, because it's every man for himself, right? I mean, I'm not going to give you the stock tip if there's only a limited amount of shares out there. I'm going to buy as many as I can. But the truth is, and believe me or not, I genuinely do not know what the next big, massive rise is. I don't know the next Paul Newman Daytona. But I will tell you a couple of watches that I think are undervalued and have room to grow, and just might do so over the course of the next 6 months, 1 year, 3 years, etc. Okay, so from the pre-owned Rolex world, I think the Explorer 2 and I think the Milgauss have room for growth. When I look at their prices next to that of subs and GMTs, I see obviously a big separation there. I see a lot of gap, and I think that gap can be closed. Now, is that a ton of money? No, it could be $1,000, it could be $1,500, but I think that those watches do represent value. Now, whether or not they're investments, that's up for you to decide. There are a lot out there. These weren't produced in small numbers, so it takes a lot for a market to actually shift and move. But I do think that an Explorer 2 is worth more than $4,000. I wouldn't be surprised to see them trading for $6,000 in years to come. So those two are in the pre-owned Rolex world. Now, go vintage Rolex. Go where I live. That's my world. The vintage, particularly dress Rolex world. That's what I live and breathe. And I'll tell you why I think that Datejust and Date8s represent incredible value that will actually rise and I think be very profitable for their owners in years to come. Rolex is basically broken up into two, fundamental, kind of worlds here. You have the GMT and the sub, and you have the Date8 and the Datejust. Of course, there's the Daytona, and I'm going to put that in that whole sports section, but it's the sports and it's the dress. And while the dress models are not inexpensive, a Datejust, serviced, original, I mean, a real quality example, you need to expect to pay $2,900 to $3,500 depending on quality, and sometimes $4,000 depending on dial. And when you're talking about Date8, you're expecting to pay between $5,000 and $7,000. We're talking about a lot of money here. These aren't like barnyard fine cheap watches. But when it comes to vintage Rolex world, one idea that has been found to be true time and time again throughout Daytonas and Submariners and GMT Masters is details. Details are extremely important in the Rolex world. Why? Because they separate, Joe from Schmo. That's why. Because people who have enormous amounts of money to spend on watches, I'm talking $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, want their piece to be different. They want that double stamp. They want that underline. They want that brown dial. They want tropical. They want all these little differences. And in the sub and GMT world, those little differences demand tens of thousands of dollars a premium. Whereas in the Date8 and Datejust world, they demand a couple $100. They demand maybe $1,000, $2,000, and that's a lot of money. But compared to the Submariner and GMT world, it's not even close. So yes, not only do I think that baseline Date8s and baseline Datejust are undervalued, I think that the extraordinary examples, Havana dials, Buckley dials, just oddball kind of stuff, that is, if you can find original, serious examples, they are incredible investments, in my opinion, to take that for what you think it might be. So that's what I think about Rolex. On to another brand, quickly, Omega. The speedies have taken massive hikes, but I do think there's still value in Omega chronographs, particularly with the 321 movements. There are a bunch of different cases. There are Seamasters, there are DeVilles, and I think that they're valuable. They have skyrocketed. Those watches used to be $1,200. Now they're $34, but that doesn't mean they're done growing. They could be worth $4,000. You can make $900. They could be worth $4,500 in the coming months. It's impossible to predict, but I do think that it's realistic to expect that or predict that. Moving to the kind of miscellaneous section, I think that the Tissot Gennaro, I think, is a very valuable watch. These watches were trading on eBay for $600-700 not too long ago, and now they're at 11 or 12. And although that doesn't seem like it's a massive hike, it's almost double. That really is a big demonstration of growth. Boulevard Royal Oaks are another example. I think that virtually any Tudor is a wonderful example. Tudor will always be, for the most part, behind Rolex, but it's a matter of what's the margin behind. The difference between Tudors and their comparable Rolex, counterparts is possibly too large. For a Datejust that's worth $3,000 and a Tudor that packs a lot of the same punch is at $1,900, there's a lot of room there for Rolex to grow and for Tudor to grow with it and close that gap. So that's a very, very interesting kind of segment. So I do think that Tudor as a whole and the Submariner models and the chronograph models, they've been exposed already. But on the dress watch world, there's definitely a lot of room for growth, and that's very exciting, especially for someone who is so bullish on Tudor. But now bringing you back to reality, I showed you a couple of watches there that I think will genuinely grow over the course of the next 6 months, year, 3 years. But let's run some numbers. Let's say you do snag one. Let's say you snag a Day-Date at $6,300 and you wear it for 2 years. And then you notice, wow, they're actively trading at $7,000, $6,900. I can make $700. I can buy myself something else, something different. It seems as if you just, profited $700. So what do? You don't want to pay dealers, right? Because they're greedy and you're not going to be able to, keep the profits that you invested and you won. It's like a broker taking all the money. So you go to eBay, right? So you list your watch on eBay, and when it sells, you pay $700 in fees anyway. And now you're down. You actually lost money on the watch that has appreciated over time. So yes, it is possible that the watch that you buy will appreciate over time. Markets change, values increase and decrease, and you might get lucky. The Day-Date or the Datejust you bought might go up in value. But unless ultimately you have a medium to sell that watch, or you have a buyer lined up, this increase in value is imaginary. It's not real. Your $700 profit goes into fees, or the $6,900 value you put on the watch is really only $64. That's what anyone will pay. So the odds are it's not as good as it sounds. But like I said, there are two kinds of people out there that actually do make money on watches. And the investor, the guy who hunts, barters, and then invests in watches, does a lot more work than most of us are prepared to do or ever even want to do. And the other guy, the lucky son of a that bought a Paul Newman in '93 for $4,000, well, I'm just not that lucky. Bottom line, watches are awesome. In my opinion, they are the best way to spend your extra luxury money. And if you buy them right, I'm talking original, I'm talking serviced, quality examples, you will not take a bath. In fact, it's very likely that you can wear that Day-Date that you bought at $6,300 for 2 years straight and lose $400. And in my opinion, that is the best $400 you ever lost. So that's it. That's how you invest or don't invest in watches. Thank you guys so much for watching today's episode of Rant&h. Don't forget to check out the watches in the watch shop at theoandharris.com tomorrow. They truly are incredible additions, and I couldn't be more proud to share them with you. So that's it. Check out the lookbook as well. Follow us on Instagram at Theo and Harris, and like this video below. Go ahead, do it.